Hi, everybody. Okay. We are going live now with Rachel Tuckman. I'm really excited about this. Rachel and I have been talking about this live for a really long time now. And we're really excited it's finally happening. I just want to make sure you could hear me because this is not where I usually go live. And hopefully you could all hear. We're going to wait for Rachel to join. Just let me know if you could hear me. Hi, Rachel. Okay, so I'm going to add her. Rachel. I'm assuming that thumbs up, Rifki, was that you could hear me. Okay, I'm excited. Hi, Rachel. How are you?
Good.
Okay, this is really exciting. I was just saying how we've been talking about going live for so long, and I'm so happy we finally made it happen.
Two.
Okay, so let's start by introducing yourself to the people that don't know who you are and what you do.
Okay, sure. My name is Rachel Tuckman. I'm a licensed mental health counselor. I work in the five towns. I work with kids and adults and women experiencing infertility and post-hysterectomy. And my account is, I started it as like a marketing tool when I was starting my practice to just like get my name out there. And now I just use it as a way to spread awareness of mental health and issues and break stigmas and talk about, I guess, what's on everyone's minds and validate and bring issues to the forefront to talk about and, I guess start conversations because that's how we break stigmas. So that's my
Right.
purpose on Instagram.
Right. Okay, amazing. So we're going to discuss tonight's topic, which is what are your values?
Yeah.
So we're going to start with that question. What are values?
Okay. So
Wait, I'm
that,
just going to interrupt you for a second. Everyone's going to ask if we're going to save the live. So Rachel is going to be recording this and posting this to her YouTube channel, which she has many, many other lives saved there with a lot of informative topics. So in case anyone's wondering.
yeah. And I
Okay.
can give it to you, Shira, if you want to have it just like for yourself, but it will be on my YouTube page. Okay. So values, and I have a list here of values. You can actually like Google core values and all of these words will come up. But values are basically deeply held principles, ideals, or beliefs that we hold or adhere to, and they give our lives meaning, right? So they're the essence of who we are, right? And our values inform our thoughts, our decisions, our actions. They guide everything we do. And values are supposed to give us inner peace. If we're staying true to our values and we have the right values, we end up feeling happy and at peace. And it kind of helps us to be more resilient because when we go through tough times, we use our values to guide us. And we know, even though this is difficult right now, I know that this is the right thing because this is what I believe is the right thing. So I feel okay, even though this is hard, I know it's going to be all right because I'm staying true to what I believe is right and what I know is right. We learn our values from our parents, our teachers, our religious leaders. Society has a really strong influence on our values. Sometimes we rebel against our values, and they change along the way. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. Like, can your values change? How do they change? What's the right? Are there things that we shouldn't change? I think like the best example is sometimes parenting. Our values shift a lot when we become parents. And that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing, and I think they should shift. So that's an example. But some of the values, the words, again, you can like Google it, core values, it'll come up. Some like examples of values are authenticity, honesty, hope, humility, spirituality, companionship, kindness, creativity, dignity. I'm looking here, loyalty, job security, financial security, truth, travel, that's a value, exploring the world, understanding, usefulness, faith, family, these are all values. Patience, social justice, like there's so many different, values that are out there. And sometimes people say like, well, how do I figure out what my values are? There's so many different, and it could be that all of these things, when I'm saying career, belonging, collaboration, commitment, you're like, yes, 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 I have 10,000 values. How do I figure out like what are my core values, right? So when you look on these like websites, if you Google core values, they'll give you like ideas of exercises that you could do to kind of narrow it down. But it's important for everyone to figure out what their values are, because again, those are like the guiding principles of your life. Those are the things that keep you in check, that help you make decisions, that help guide your relationships and the kind of relationships that you're in, and that help you, you know, if you have a family, they help you guide how you're raising your kids. So being in touch with what your values are and having the right values for you. Again, everybody's values are different. So my values may differ from yours, but it doesn't mean you have the wrong values. We just have different values. So doing what works for you, that's really important. And again, other people might have different values than you, and we'll talk about it. It doesn't mean that you need to compromise your values because someone else has different ones, you know? So that's what values are. They are the guiding principles, the beliefs that we have that guide our life and the decisions that we make.
Right. Okay, so then moving on to the next question, how do you identify what your values are?
Okay, right. So I told you there's this list of values, this core values.
Right.
So basically what most of these like, you know, value identifiers suggest, and it's something that I do with clients who are trying to figure themselves out. And this could be like a 16-year-old trying to figure themselves out, or a 45-year-old in my office trying to figure out like what matters to me. I have no clue. You know, sometimes we don't know what our values are either, because growing up, it was always just dictated to us, like, this is what you're supposed to think and feel, and these are your values. And it was never really like something that we were allowed to explore or think about. It was dictated to us. And I think actually Blimy Heller, Unconditional Parenting, she talks about this a lot. Recently, she's been talking about it, how values are sometimes dictated to kids, and they're not given a say, and they're not given the opportunity to discover for themselves if those values are things that they want to take on for themselves. And we want to give kids that opportunity, right? Like my values are not necessarily what my children will have. I would hope that they share the same values, right? The same core values, but they may not have, you know, the other values that I have, right? So if my core values are honesty, being a good person, family, you know, integrity, I want my kids to have those core values, but they may not really care so much about the other values that I have, you know? So if I value like, you know, fitness, you know, they may not care about that, you know, so that might not be their thing. So everyone's allowed to have different values, but the way that you figure out what they are is basically you go through this list. So go, you know, look, Google core values and get a list, and just go through the list and like, look at what are the words that stand out to you that you're like, yeah, that I like that, you know, achievement. Yeah. Adventure, not so much, you know, altruism. Nice. Maybe that's not me. So go through the list and figure out what words speak to you, and then you're going to kind of like group them into like smaller groups, and then through there you're going to kind of like, it's a process basically of like narrowing it down and seeing like what's the common theme of all the words that you picked, you know. So through that you're going to figure out what matters to you. So if it's about family, connection, love, tradition, you're going to know that those things are very important to you, right? I would group it overall as like connection, you know, and relationships. That's something that's a value to you. Being, you know, having people around you that you love and feeling part of something, that's something that's really important to you. So that's how you would figure out, that's one of your core values, right? So you do that, and then you consider, again, why are these things important to you? So when you're going through this list, you can say like, what is it about these things that like matters to me so much? Why is, let's say, you know, career so important to me? What is it about it? Is it the money that's important? Or is it achievement that's important? Is it self-actualization that like in my career? So let's say for me, if career was one of my core values, is that because I want to be this prestigious whatever? Or is it because I feel this like desire to help people and to put good in the world? And I feel like it's such a great thing for me to be able to have a job that also helps create, you know, healing and help and good for people. So then I would say my core value is not really so much career, but more altruism and wanting to do good for people, right? So you think about like, why is this important to me? And that helps you get down more to what your value really is. And something to think about also, if you feel stuck, like you're not really sure, like think about role models that you have, like what they embody, what you like about them. You know, so it could be someone like, you know, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, right? So it could be what did you love about him? His kindness to others, his unconditional acceptance of every human being, not just Jews. You know, his kindness. What was it about him? You know, Martin Luther King, was it he fought for social justice and he was committed to nonviolence? It could be anyone. You know, it could be someone that you see on here. Like, is Rachel Tuckman your role model? Not, no, but you know,
Yes.
who is your role model, and what is it about them that you like? What is it that you admire about them? Again, you can help narrow it down. Like, what is it about that person or what they did or what they stood for that I honor and respect, and that helps you to see what your values are, you know? So it could even be like Holocaust figures, right? It's that World Remembrance Day. Like, think about people who helped in the Shoah or whatever. What was it about them? Their bravery, how they stood up for their beliefs and values no matter what, that strength. Again, thinking about those things and helping you hone in on why you find those things important. And that helps you get to know yourself better also, you know, what you're passionate about and what drives you. So those are some ways to help you figure out what your values are. Going through a list, and, you know, again, you're going to have probably lots of words that speak to you, and then trying to narrow it down a little bit. And again, looking at people around you and saying, like, who do I admire and respect? And what is it about them? It's not just like she has great hair. That might be, you know, she has great hair. But what else is it about her that you love and respect or admire? And that helps for you to kind of get a better picture. Also, observe yourself and learn, right? So when you're making choices and making decisions, like, put a label on the value behind your decision. So let's say you get this great job opportunity and, you know, they tell you that they want you working, you know, a crazy amount of hours, but the pay is amazing and the benefits are amazing. And you're just like, I can't, like, I'll never see my kids. Like, I can't do it. Or I'm never going to see my husband. I'm not going to see my family. And you turn it down. So your thinking in that moment was, my family, I want to be around, so no amount of money in the world or benefits is important enough to me that I'm gonna not be around. Not to say that if you take a job like that you don't care about your family, but I'm saying if that's your thought process, then that means that being present for your family, physically present and being around, that's your value, you know, as opposed to someone else might say, you know what, I won't be around so much, but I'll be able to provide for my family, and I'll be able to financially make sure that, you know, we're set and we have what we need. So then there's that balance of, like, you want that financial security for your family, right? So it's not family so much as the priority, more of the financial stability for your family, right? So, and again, not saying that family is not your priority, but your financial stability for your family is the priority. So that's a wonderful value. So again, thinking about that, what does that mean to you? Why is that important? And then, you know, be true to that. If that's what you want and that is what you value, it doesn't matter what anyone says. So if someone's judging you, like, wow, you took an 80-hour-a-week job, like, you never see your kids, I would never do that. You have to be confident in your values that you say, yeah, you know, I work 80-hour weeks, but hey, they give me tons of vacation. I'm off on Yontif. It's about the amount of time, the quality of time we spend together, not the amount of time. I FaceTime with them when they get home. Not that you have to justify it, but you got to feel confident in your decision that, okay, you don't want to work 80-hour weeks. That's for you and that's your value. But, like, for me, this is what I need to do for my family, and this is what I want to do. It's not right or wrong. It's for each person to decide on their own what works for them and what's their value system. So that's kind of pick your values.
Right. That's funny. First of all, I noticed right when we came on that we're both wearing best beanies, and you just commented that. I think sometimes people have a hard time when it comes to decision making when they're not sure what their values are. Right. You know, you could go through all these lists and stuff, and when it comes to actual, like, decision making, that's when people, like, wait, what do I believe? What do I think? What do I?
Right.
So
what happens there then is that sometimes, like, if you've never defined, like, what is true to you, you know, and again, that goes back to maybe you didn't have an opportunity as a kid to really think about what matters to you. I'm going to get into this a little bit more, but you feel out of touch with yourself then because you don't know what matters. Your parents never said, like, what do you think about that? Do you think that's the right thing? How do you feel? What would you do, right? And that's why it's so important that we have conversations with our kids. We don't just tell them what to do. We let them think about what they want to do in a situation. You know, we sit down and talk it out with them and let them process it. They'll come to it on their own, especially if you are the model of the values that you want your kids to have. They will model those values too. So if you're the kind of person that you believe in, you know, you don't want your kids hanging out at certain places because it's just like, it doesn't look good, it's not nice, it's not, you know, that's not what we do. Instead of being like, you are not allowed to go to such places and blah, blah, blah. If they come and present it to you and they're like, oh, you know, there's this like, you know, everyone's hanging out at the park and I want to go. You could say like, okay, I hear that. And like, yeah, everyone's going. But like, what do you think if like the principal walks by and sees you guys hanging out there? Like, what do you think she's going to think? Like, do you think that's a good idea?
I hated when my parents did that.
But forces you to then
right.
be more honest with yourself and be like, nah, probably not. It's so annoying to have to admit it, but you're doing your kids a favor because they're coming to the decision on their own. It's not you're just dictating to them, you cannot go to the park. It's, listen, I hear what you're saying. You know, you want to go. I just want you to think about it. In the end of the day, if they decide to go to this park, like, it is what it is, you know, like, you can tell them not to go. Again, depending on their age, I'm assuming like a teenager here. If you say don't go and then they're like angry at you, once they leave the house, you don't have control, right? So you're kind of setting them up to be lying and deceiving you. So you want to set it up that like you give them the opportunity to think about it and make a good decision. If they make the decision that you don't think is the best decision for them, let, you know, this is life. They got to do it and they're going to have to deal with the consequences if there are, you know. But we have to let kids make their own decisions and have a voice. And that's how they learn what their values are. And that instills in them also a value of respect and hearing people and letting people have a voice and understanding that other people are allowed to have different ways of thinking, right? So that's an important value too that we want to give to them. You know, that it's not just like, you know, do what I say and don't question it. Like, no, this is a collaborative team effort here. You are my child and your voice matters. And if we give them a voice, then again, they're able to think about things and have an opinion and have a thought process. And that helps them have that internal voice to help them make decisions later on. So it's hard. Again, if we don't give our kids that voice, then all the more so also, I'm going to look at the comments in a minute, but all the more so they feel they're out of touch with themselves. Adults also, I have this with adults in my practice, like they feel so out of touch with themselves and then they start just following societal norms and values or what other people are doing or what other people want them to do. And they're just not thinking about themselves. You know, they're just thinking about like, oh, what do other people do? That's what I'll do. And we don't want that. You definitely don't want that for your kids. And you don't want that for yourself because it's just emptiness then. Like you're looking to everyone else to guide your life. But it's your life, you know? So right. You don't know if you're looking at this and you're like, I have no idea what matters to me. Like, then again, you got to think about it and you have to look around at your relationships and say like, what do I like about this person in my life? Why are they in my life? How do they make me feel? What do I like about my job? Am I miserable in my job? So why do I stay in my job? Again, it might be because it's financial security. Okay, so there you go. That's a value to you then. I can put up with misery for a little bit because I need to make sure that I have, you know, a job and an income and that my tuitions are paid and whatever it is. So that's a value, you know, and you're willing to kind of sacrifice a little bit of yourself to make sure that everything else is in place. So if you're having real trouble figuring it out, then I would say definitely talk to someone and, you know, kind of be like, have them be a sounding board for you. But I find that people who have a hard time knowing what their values are generally people that did not have a voice when they were younger. Maybe they were people pleasers, like they're, you know, again, their parents were just like, you do whatever I say and like, we don't want to hear from you. And that's why we have to like let our kids figure out who they are. Again, like we put our values out there. I see this a lot also. Sometimes I'll have parents who come in and they're so stressed that their kids are so materialistic. They're teenagers. So materialistic. I don't understand that we don't care. We're labels, nothing. We don't think about this stuff. We're so low key. And my kid's obsessed with labels. All he wants or all she wants is Yeezy this and, you know, whatever, spiritual gangster that. And like, why do they care about this stuff? I don't even care about it. And I always say, like, listen, it's great that that's not your value, but like, this is such a typical teenage behavior. I would say that you can indulge it within your value system, right? So it doesn't mean that if you don't want to spend that kind of money on those things, then you don't have to. You can say to them, hey, great, I know that you want that super expensive sweatshirt. I'm not willing to pay for it. If you want to get a job and babysit and save up, totally. Like I would normally pay $30 towards a sweatshirt. Let's say I'm throwing out a random number here, $15 towards a sweatshirt. I'll give you that and you can pay the rest. It teaches them responsibility. It teaches them to think about how valuable is this sweatshirt to me. They might buy the sweatshirt. It might be very valuable at that point in their life. But you're also teaching them the value of like, my value is I'm not throwing around money so that you could wear that label and be an advertisement for that company. It's not important to me. If it is to you, cool, I'll meet you halfway. I'm not going to try to, destroy your life and tell you, no, that's not my value, so it's not yours. They are an individual. They're allowed to experiment with their values. And then I tell parents, our hope is that if you just like let them have that freedom a little bit to see how they feel and what it does for them, eventually they end up coming back to your value system. If you've always been a person who's unconditional, non-judgmental, there for them, again, but with solid boundaries of like, hey, I get that this is where you're going, but like within limits for us, then they do end up coming back because they're not resentful. They're not like, I always wanted this and my parents never gave it to me and they're so cheap and I hate them and I'm never going to be like that. If you meet them halfway, they're more likely to come back around and want to model who you are, So, and that's kind of where I would say, like, where I was saying that sometimes values change or they can be flexible. That's like the perfect example of like where if maybe you don't believe in like labels and walking around being like an advertisement for Chanel or whatever, you have to understand that your kids might be different than you. And like you have to kind of meet them halfway and bend a little bit, not compromise, but bend a little bit in order to ensure that your values are kind of passed down to them. If that's your core value and that's something that's really important to you. So being
Right.
rigid in our values, that's like not always the best thing.
Right. There were some really good questions here, so I figured we'll go to that before, if you see any that you want to answer.
Well, I love Gitty's comments. I'm just,
Yeah.
you're the best. So, okay.
The Meira question. It's funny, I was going to comment that when you said it.
Right. Okay. Regarding the example of principals seeing them, aren't you teaching them to make decisions based on what others think of them rather than what they know is right for them? So listen, I actually spoke about this on one of my Instagram stories about like caring what people think. Obviously, we don't want to guide our lives according to like what people are thinking and always be like nervous. But there is a point where it is important for us to consider how we are coming off to people. So if you want to get a job, you don't show up in your pajamas looking like a sack of garbage. You care about your impression. You make sure that your hair looks nice. You make sure that you're dressed appropriately and professionally. You make sure your resume looks good. You don't just like write it on like a messy paper. You're like, oh, here, you come in together because you want to make a good impression. If your child is applying to a seminary or a yeshiva or a school, they don't just get to show up like untucked, messy, like unorganized, their bag flying everywhere. You tell them, put yourself together. You want to present yourself well. Like you want to make the right impression. It's not about you care what people think. It's about you want people to see who you are and you want to make a good impression. You're not faking, so it's not teaching them to care what people think versus knowing what's right. What's right for them in that moment is to be aware of how they are coming across to people and the impact of their behavior. And that is important. We do need to care about the impact of our behavior, right? I can't control, listen, if I'm like just, doing my thing and you don't like what I'm doing, I can't control what you think about me. But if I know that I'm doing the right thing, then that's where my responsibility ends. So I understand the question and it's a great question, but again, we're teaching them just to be mindful of the impact that they make with their behavior and how they present themselves.
Right. Okay. Was there anything else that you wanted to answer? I should go on to the next topic.
What happened? Oh, okay. I'm looking to see what else there is. Peer pressure. Someone said, yeah, peer pressure, like their friends are wearing it. They want to wear it. That's what happens,
Right. Yeah. Okay, fine. So let's go on to the next. Can your values change? So I guess let's elaborate on that. You had mentioned it a little bit earlier.
Yeah. So yes, our values can definitely change. Again, I would think that um, having kids, sometimes your values shift, right? So it could be that you value more security or financial stability, or you know, sometimes like just the sometimes parents will start out as very like maybe authoritative, and they're dictating to their kids, and then they realize, what, this doesn't really work. Maybe I want to be more gentle in my parenting. So their values shift from I'm just going to tell my kid what to do and they have to listen to me, to having a more respectful, gentle approach to working with their kids. Some parents, it's so funny when I did my whole series on spanking, not so funny, it was interesting how I did my series on spanking, and then parents messaged me and they're like, you know what, I always thought spanking was okay, and I thought that that was the right way to like discipline my kid, and now after reading your whole series, like I never want to do it again. So those values shifted. They thought that that's a good form of discipline, and that is discipline. And they, after learning with me, they realized like, I don't ever want to do that. I'm going to change how I approach my child's misbehavior or whatever it is. So those values shifted. Divorce. So if you get divorced, like your values may shift to freedom and self-discovery. Or it could be you were someone who never believed in divorce and you believe in sticking it out and staying together, but then you're in a situation where it's not good and it's not healthy for you and it's not healthy for the kids, and you realize that it's better to be in two separate homes and have a healthier, relationship with your spouse and for your kids. So again, it can shift. And I think that we should always kind of be open to that. But again, those core values don't generally shift. So again, respect, honesty, integrity, those core values should stay the same. Everything else, kind of like those extras, those might shift, or might be, need a little bit of flexibility. But it's kind of like you have to constantly be reassessing your values, especially when you have children. I think all of us, if we think about it, like when you first had kids, they always say like the first kid is like the korban, they're like the sacrifice, because like you have no clue what you're doing and you're so uptight and you're so rigid with stuff and you're like, this is how we're doing it, and then as your family grows or as your child grows, you kind of realize like, why was I being so uptight about this? Like, it's so not important, and this is what's important instead. So your values shift, so for me, my example is always like, I used to be so uptight about like orderliness and like cleanliness, and everything has to be in its place. And that's not even a value. It was just like, that was my need for control. And like, if things were out of place, I felt very out of place. And it made me feel so out of sorts. I can't be out of place. I can't. As my children grew up, I realized like, I can't be that mom that's like cleaning up while they're playing or yelling at them to clean up. Like, I'm taking away their childhood for what? For my needs and my like obsession with like everything has to be in its spot and in its place. I need to like look at my values, So then I stopped and I took a step back and I said, I need to start becoming comfortable with the mess and seeing it differently. The mess is they're having fun and they're playing and they're enjoying and they're, making memories. And I can, instead of staring at the mess and being stressed out, I can get involved in the mess and have fun with them, And so that's how I shifted. Like, I created a new value system, and I shifted out of like a need for control and orderliness, which was not, it wasn't manifesting, that value was not manifesting in a good way. And I found a better value that works for me, So when I was a teenager growing up, that worked for me, that orderliness and that sense of like having to have control. That was something that was very good for me. I needed it mentally. It didn't help as I was getting, older and moving on. And that's something that we constantly have to be thinking about, that sometimes we have these values or these ideas that are good coping mechanisms and they help us kind of survive in certain moments in time, but sometimes they have to shift and change, as we get older and as we change and as our relationships grow. Sometimes those values change, and it's not a bad thing. It doesn't mean you're a flaky person or you're not a good person or you don't have, that must have not meant anything to you. No, again, there's a core value that is allowing me to shift this, this peripheral value, and that's okay. You're allowed to do that, and I think that's something that's important for people to remember. You're allowed to constantly be evaluating and shifting. That's part of being a human. We're always growing and changing. It's never like, period, done. Okay, this is who Rachel is for the rest of her life. I won't be the same person in 2 years, in a year from now, that I am today. You know? And that's okay. It's a good thing.
Right. I keep seeing a repeated a question about teenagers and when they just don't care. I feel like this is kind of a live for teenagers, dealing with teenagers to get on specifics on that. I don't know if you want to answer that or if you would just cover that a different time. What do they do if their kid doesn't care? I mean, I think it's normal for teenagers not to really care about your values. It will pass. If you model things properly, they usually come back to a lot of your values,
Yeah. And the more you fight them and try to force your values on them, the more they resent them. So again, think about your values. Again, you might have values of like, I want you to dress a certain way, or I want you to, daven in shul, or I want you to have certain friends. And if they're not adhering to those values, then you have to go back again and look at, what are my core values though? What do I want? I want a relationship with my child. So if I'm on their case about, you better daven in shul, and you better wear this, and you better not hang out with that person, am I putting my core value of relationship in jeopardy?
Or honesty.
Or
they might lie.
Yeah.
Right.
Am I honesty and integrity and safety and respect? Am I putting that in jeopardy? I am. So I'm going to back it down right now. And my kid is going to remember. And again, I see this so much in my work, and I'm sure anyone who works with kids who are either, who are having difficulty, or even just typical teenagers, like the parents that are steady and unconditional and really like kind of like turn away, like don't look, again, not ignoring or whatever, but choosing your battles and saying, at the end of the day, my kid needs to just know I love them and accept them no matter what, and I'm here for them. Obviously, again, we're not talking about a kid who's engaging in serious, dangerous issues. I'm talking about just the typical teenager right now. That's like a whole separate thing, a kid who's, really engaging in high-risk behaviors. But for a kid who's just like being a kid, a teenager, typical, whatever it is, like, you have to say to yourself, like, what is more important to me right now? My value of like having a relationship with them and keeping them connected to me and having them be a good person, or like, fighting with them about like, you better not go to that person's house, or you better not do this, or you got to pick, So again, I would hope that your core value of relationship and connection and, well-being and happiness, or whatever it is, that would be something that you would choose over, something that's a little more trivial in that moment. So that's what I would say for that. I'm just seeing what people are saying here.
Yeah, teenagers are teenagers.
Say when they don't care, like, okay, so they don't care. Like, again, this is teenagers. Like, you got to know who you're dealing with. But
right. And someone said earlier about a little kid. Little kids don't really have values. We're not really talking about little kids. And, you do say no to a little kid sometimes if they want to do something unsafe. So someone just said that earlier. So I'm just... Okay, so let's go on to the next thing. Okay, so kids and values. So how do we teach them our values? You kind of did mention that before. I don't know if you wanted to elaborate, because you did write that down.
Yeah. I mean, so teaching them values, again, is through modeling and through being that, through the values that you want your kids to have, you have to encompass them yourself. It has to be who you are. So if I want my child to be a kind person, I have to be kind to them. Not just kind to others, kind to them. So I have to speak to them nicely. I have to be respectful to them. I have to consider their feelings. I have to give them a space to grow and to have their thoughts and to, to just be their own person. I need to be kind to them. And I need to be kind to the other people in my home, to the other parent, to my husband, or, whoever, and to their siblings if they have, and to my parents, we have to be kind to everyone around us if we want them to be kind. If we want them to be honest, we have to be honest, So it's all about, your kids have to see you modeling the values that you want them to have. It's not enough to just be like, well, you should really be nice to the new girl in the neighborhood, and then new people move in and you don't talk to them, you don't look at them, you don't invite them, you don't, then they're like, well, what, I have to be nice to the new girl in school, but you're not even talking to that new lady in shul, like, well, I don't understand. So you have to make sure that you're modeling the values that you want them to have. And then again, also having discussions with them about why these things are important or what they think about these values, like getting them to think about it, so having like playing out scenarios with them. It could be at the dinner table that you do this, at the Shabbos table Friday night, when they go to bed at night, like throwing out scenarios and being like, what would you think? Like, what would you do in this situation? Or, and how come and how would you feel if? It helps them to get in touch with like what matters to them and how they think. But again, like your sensitivities and your values will be what your kids have. Sometimes, like I'll have kids come into my practice that their parents really are like fantastic people and they're not fooling me. Like in my dealings with them, working with the kid and whatever it is, I see that they're really amazing parents and they do have the right values, but somewhere along the line, like their kid got lost and like is not sharing those values in that moment and is, totally abandoning all of the things that the family cares about. So if you have that kind of situation, I don't want you to blame yourself and be like, well, maybe I'm not a good person and maybe I'm not honest and maybe I'm not nice if my kid is not nice and not honest. I would say there must be something going on with that child that they don't feel like they want to have those values. And it might not necessarily be anything you're doing. It could just be something they're going through. They're sad. They don't like themselves. Something is up. So you got to figure out, like, why don't you feel good about yourself right now that you don't want to do X, Y, and Z? That honesty is not important to you, that you're cheating on tests or whatever it is, or being nice to friends is not something you want to do. Like, what's going on with you? Why are you feeling not good about yourself that you don't want to be this kind of person? And again, it's not a rejection of you. And sometimes parents get very uptight about that, like, and they take it personally when their kid is not, honoring their value system. It's a rejection of them. So you have to view it differently. It's not a rejection of you. It's they're trying to find themselves. They're going through something. And again, you have to have that value of like unconditional love, acceptance, support, whatever it is, and hope that they will then come back to a value system that is good for them and that you can also, that you say, okay, great. Like, I'm just happy that we found some middle ground. But the way that, again, I guess the summary here is like the way that kids learn values is from your behavior. And the home is really the main place. I know sometimes parents are like, oh, what about this school and whatever. Pick a school that's in line with your values, right? So if you're going to send your kid to a super religious school and you're not super religious and you're maybe like living a totally different life, and then when the kid comes home and says like, oh, my rabbi said this or my teacher said that, and you're like, oh, they're so ridiculous. You're teaching them something, right? To not respect authority, maybe like putting people down, being judgmental, not, being true to who you are, kind of living one way and not being another way. It's important to pick a school that reflects your values and your lifestyle. So it's important also, look at that, think about that. If your kids are coming home with messages from the school all the time that you're like, hey, that's like not really in line with who we are, like, religiously or morally, then you got to look at that, because that does confuse your kids about what their values are. And not to say that if you send your kid to school, you're going to agree with everything they say, but there is a respectful way to let your kids know, like, oh, that's really cool that your teacher brought that up. That's such an interesting perspective. And I know there's people that do that. This is how we do it in our family, but we respect everything and everyone. And that is a legitimate point of view. That's just not how we do it, But again, it shouldn't be a massive discrepancy. Then I would say, like, I think school. So make sure that the school they're in holds true to your value system and your level of observance and your way of living, and be that person yourself that you want them to be.
Right. Okay, so now moving on, what do you do when friends or family have different values than you?
Right. So this is where boundaries are very important. Boundaries I talk about a lot. Also, I have a YouTube video about it. I talk about it a lot on my page. Boundaries are basically boundaries are fences. They are not walls, right? So boundaries are how we preserve our relationships. We let the good in and we keep the bad out. So I can have a relationship with someone who has completely different values than me, but we have a respect for each other. And actually, Melinda and I spoke about this because we have very different ideas about diets and, you know, that kind of stuff. And so when we spoke about because people are like, are you guys still friends? Like, she's like, you know, she's diet and you are anti-diet. How does that work? So I said, like, we discuss this all the time. We do have discussions about her views and my views, and it's always respectful. And I don't agree, and she doesn't necessarily see my point of view, or maybe she, you know, there are some commonalities that we can find that we say, okay, like, I hear that, but like, we kind of just understand that, like, we're just coming from two different points of view. It doesn't make me think that overall I can't relate to her, or I can't understand her, or I can't speak to her. You know, we still have a friendship. Our husbands are friends. We have meals together. Like, we're still very much connected, and in our community together, we share things and we do things together and we work on projects together. So you can share different values with a person and still be connected to them, and it doesn't have to affect your values, you know? So I can listen to her point of view just to listen. I don't need to like think like, oh, what's going to be my rebuttal and how am I going to prove to her that she should think the way that I think. You're entitled to your opinions and lifestyles and values, and I'm entitled to mine. And just like I don't want anyone telling me how to live my life, I don't need to tell anyone else how to live their life, right? If it's impacting me though, right? So if someone's trying to stick their values, insert their values in my life or on my children, that's when the boundary of using my voice is going to come up. So I'm going to say, like, you know, if your mom is on you about like, why do you send your kids to such religious camps? It's not nice. I didn't raise you that way. You could say like, yeah, I'll pay for them to go to this camp. And you're like, I don't want my kids to go to that camp. You could say like, Ma, thank you so much. And I know, you know, it's probably hard for you because like, I didn't grow up this way, but like, this is what we want for our kids and our families. And like, I so much appreciate that you want to help pay for that camp, but like, we're sending to this camp. So if you want to chip in, awesome. If not, like, we'll make our own way. We were planning on doing it anyway. So just having that boundary of, I understand that other people live different than me or may not like what I'm doing, but that's okay. They don't have to like what I'm doing. And I think part of being able to stick to that is also having a really good support system. So either, you know, if it's, you know, within your immediate family, so your spouse and your kids, like knowing that you and your spouse are on the same page of like, yeah, this is who we are. And I know that maybe my parents don't love it. They think I'm too religious, or maybe I'm not religious enough, or I'm too lenient as a parent, or they don't get this whole gentle parenting thing. They think I'm not disciplining my kids, and they're judging me. They're allowed to have their opinions. It doesn't mean that what I'm doing is wrong. I'm doing what's right for me. So you kind of have to have that, like, you know, reminder of this is my life and this is what I'm doing for me that makes sense to me. And not everybody has to like it. Nobody has to like it except me. And I don't owe an explanation to anyone, you know? You get confused when you start thinking about what other people want you to do and what their morals and values are. And that's why it's important to listen. Again, you can have that discussion, like, why does your mom think it's important for your kids to go to this school or that school? You could hear her out, but it doesn't have to impact your decisions. You got to make decisions according to your values and what works for you, you know? And who knows, maybe it will change, but if right now this is what speaks to you and makes sense, you have to be confident in that and stick with that. It's not always easy, but again, a support system is a really important thing to have so that you can stick to your values, you know?
Right. And sometimes you could have mutual respect on both ends, like you were saying with you and Melinda, and sometimes the other person is just going to keep wanting to push their values on you, and you have to just stay strong.
Yeah.
And it could get hard.
Yeah, and that's where a boundary would come into place. You could say, like, you know, if someone is pushing something on you, like, let's say religiously, you know, they want you to be something that you don't feel comfortable being, or they want you to be less than or more than, and they keep bringing it up and keep bringing it up and keep bringing it up. You could say, like, you know what, I really love spending time with you. I want to take this conversation off the table. Like, it makes me feel like I don't want to be around you when we talk about this. So let's just make this something we don't talk about. We can talk about everything else. Let's put this away because we're never going to see eye to eye on it. And I'm not budging on it. And that's the end of it, you know? And hopefully they'll respect that. If they don't, that's a whole other issue, you know? And that's where my talk on boundaries would come in, like what to do when people aren't respecting your boundaries. But you should never be compromising your values because someone else doesn't like them, you know? It's just not.
Right.
That's not something you have to do or should do.
Right. And it really is about confidence because I think someone asked in the questions about, um, you know, disciplining in public. You know, like you want to stick to your values, but then it gets uncomfortable when people are watching and you're like, okay, fine, take that lollipop instead of doing what you usually do. You know,
Right.
it does get hard, and that's where, you know, you have to work on being confident with your discipline
Yeah.
methods.
Yeah.
Someone just asked over here, what if you and your spouse don't agree on the same discipline style? So I guess the value of their
Right.
type of parenting. So
So,
that could be with anything.
yeah. So that's a great question. That's something I get a lot also. And my answer is always, you don't necessarily have to have the same parenting style as your spouse. And whenever I say that, people are like, what? How does that work? If you guys can find like a few like core things that you agree on that you want for your kids or you don't want for your kids, then you guys can each kind of parent in your own way. You're not sending mixed messages. So if you guys can agree that like you want your kids to be respectful, you want to make sure like, you know, their homework is done, you want to make sure that, you know, bedtime is whatever. If you can agree on those things, then overall you're pretty much set. Your spouse doesn't have to do things in the same exact way that you do. As long as, again, as long as you're respectful of one another, like your kids will turn out okay. They're not going to be confused. They're not going to feel like you're not on the same page. The core is to be consistent so that you're giving the same messages, even if you're not giving it in the same way. You know, so obviously, if you have an abusive spouse, right, who's being abusive to your kids and you're not, that's a different story. I'm not talking about such an extreme case here. I'm talking about like just like minors, you know, maybe he says yes all the time and you say no all the time and you know, you want him to kind of be more, you know, more structured or whatever it is. He doesn't have to parent the same way as you. He's a different person. And sometimes that dynamic works, that one is a little bit more lenient and one is a little bit more stringent. If you can't find the balance of like him kind of learning to be a little bit more structured and stricter about certain things, then you just say, okay, this is our dynamic and we're going to figure out how to make it work in the best way for our kids. You know, so if being lenient is his thing and there's moments where, or times when it's like so great for the kids to have that because he's not as uptight about things, let him have that. Let him be the, you know, the Disney dad. And if being uptight, right, I'm just using that word uptight, but being a little bit more structured and careful about things, like that works in certain moments, and he also has to respect that. So the core is that you guys are respectful to one another. Okay, I get it. You don't want to do things the way I do, fine, but we always have to be respectful of each other. And if I'm telling you in this moment right now, I don't think that we should be doing that, then you have to honor that, you know, and he has the same thing. If I'm telling you like, you know, you got to let go a little bit and let the kids have fun. Like we're on vacation. They don't have to go to bed at 8:00. You can let this go. You got to listen to that too. So it's more about like balancing and having respect and being able to negotiate and honor each other's different styles. It doesn't have to be the same. When it is the same, it's great. More consistency is always great, but it doesn't mean that you're inconsistent because you don't have the same personalities and how you deal with your kids. Sometimes that's better for your kids, you know? It's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just, again, it's all a matter of perspective. And at the end of the day, respect. You know, because if their whole lives they're growing up with you yelling at their dad or yelling, or, you know, he's yelling at mom about you're not strict enough or you don't do enough or you don't, you know, you say yes all the time. Like, that's not the thing. You know? It's more helpful
Right.
for see, like, my mom and dad did things differently, but they always respected each other and they always did it with love, you know? Mm-hmm. So it's going to have to be, though, an ongoing conversation with your spouse of like, hey, we're honoring each other's differences, like, but we have to remember, be on the same page, you know?
Right. Okay. So let's go to the last question. We're running out of time. What do you do when your child is not sharing your values? So I guess when they get older and it's hard for you, so.
Yeah. So that is hard. when we work so hard to, lead them on a certain path and they're not heading to that path. So again, we sort of mentioned it before, but I would say that you have to practice the value of acceptance and grace and gratitude. So finding, okay, maybe they're not identifying with your values, certain values, but maybe there are other things about them that are really amazing and fantastic that you are proud of. So maybe they're not necessarily lining up with exactly who you wanted them to be, who you envisioned, but maybe there's something else that they're doing which is really great and amazing. So I think that's really important. And again, I think the perspective also of not taking it personally and seeing it a rejection of you, that's really important. If you understand that sometimes when our kids have their own value system that's maybe different than ours, a lot of parents are like, oh, I failed, I didn't do right. And I always say, no, change your mindset. You did an incredible job. They're thinking for themselves and creating their own value system. They're creating a whole new set of values for them that works for them. And again, are they an axe murderer? No, but are they doing, we hope, but are they doing things a little bit different than you, but they're still a solid, good person, again, with those core values, who you want them to be as people. At the end of the day, when you sit down, are you what do you want for your kid? You want them to be rich, funny, religious, and, great hair, or you want them to be good people, honest people, kind people, people of integrity, people of service who do work, things in the community and help and whatever it is. Sometimes you have to really step back and say okay, yes, I wanted my child to be religious or to get married or to, live a certain lifestyle, and they're not, and that hurts. Acknowledge that pain. Don't deny it, and don't be oh, it's fine. Acknowledge that you feel like you failed, but then understand that that's just a feeling and that's not a fact. And again, reframing it as, this is who they are, and are there things about them that I can look at and be proud of? And the chances are that you can. And if you can't, I would say go to a therapist, get an objective third party to sit down with you and help you find what is it about your child that you can be proud of and you can feel connected to. Because at the end of the day, that's what matters the most, is your relationship and connection to them. Not that they are who you wanted them to be, but that you're connected to them, Sometimes parents don't have that value. They just want their kids to be clones of them and live their life, and they don't care at what cost. My kid can hate me. We don't have to have a relationship. I don't care. But, again, that's a value system, I guess. But I would hope that those value systems would be to stay connected, because we all need that. We need connection. We need, if you can be close with your family and you can be close with your kids and your parents, you should have that, And sadly, there's so many people that cannot have it. So stepping back and saying, what's the most important thing to me here? Staying connected with my kid and being in their life. And at the end of the day, at 120, I say, I raised my kids and I had a beautiful relationship with them. Or is it that they have to be exactly what I wanted them to be and they weren't, and forget it, I cut them off and I hate them and I reject them and they rejected everything that I ever tried to give them? It's not about you, we're not raising our kids to be clones of us. We're raising them to figure out who they are, and we hope that they're going to be good, productive, helpful members of society. So trying to see, are they being those people? That's really what matters. And again, staying connected and feeling loving with them makes it a little bit easier to digest, maybe that they're not exactly what you had hoped they would turn out to be.
Right. Okay, there's a bunch of comments saying that's not easy. Rachel didn't say that's easy. It's just what you have to do.
Yeah, it's not easy. Raising kids is not easy. Who's having an easy time raising kids? It's hard work. Nothing in life is easy. But that's kind of you have to pick your poison in life. There's this great line in this book. There's a curse word. The title is a curse, but The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F by Mark Manson. And he says, everybody thinks that happiness means the absence of hardship and problems. No. Happiness means that you have good hardships and good problems, So if you want to have a date night, your problem is we need a babysitter and we need to figure out where we want to go, We're raising kids and we have to figure out what school they want to go to, and we want to buy a house. We want to know what neighborhood we're going to live in. These are good problems, right? We hashtag it first world problems. those are good things to have, you know? So it's not the absence of problems and the absence of hardship and like it's so easy. No, but it's sometimes these are the things that we have to go through in order to have a good result and in order to find happiness. You know, going to the gym doesn't always feel good when you're there. It hurts. But at the end of the day, you feel good. You did something good for your body. You feel stronger. You feel happier. You took some time for yourself. That's what you do. But you don't love it when you're there necessarily. It doesn't feel good. Your muscles hurt. You're sweaty, whatever it is, you know? So you have to kind of pick your poison. Like these are the problems that are going to come along with whatever I'm, you know, putting myself into right now, but it's worth it because this is what's going to make me happy, you know? So yeah, acceptance is hard, but in the long run, the payoff is so great, you know?
Right. Hold on one second. Okay, I think we're running out of time. I think we have like 1 minute. So I guess you want to end off with saying how people, like what you have, like how people can find you and
Yeah, my
your
Instagram,
YouTube channel.
Tuckman, LMHC. And you can find Facebook. I'm on a little bit, not really so much. I'm in the 5 towns. You can contact me there. But the best way to reach me is through my page, and then I'll give you any other contact information that you would want. And a lot of what we talked about tonight, I have on that page also. And we'll save this.
Yeah. Okay, and I highly recommend checking out Rachel's other lives. Thank you so much for being here. This was a great topic, and I appreciate it. Okay, thanks for joining. Have a good night.
Good night.
Okay, good night, everybody. Thanks for joining. I'm going to try.